Hey there, Hexers. This is Function here. I'm going to be doing part one of my Gen Con wrap up. In this one, I'm going to be talking about my experiences interacting with the Cryptozoic crew and just how Gen Con was for me in general. I had a great time. Part two is going to be talking more about my gameplay experience with the Hex League and my first impressions there. Before I get started though, I want to say a few things. The whole weekend was super exciting. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep because of that, because the whole time I was just amped up. And so if you came and talked to me on either Saturday or Sunday, I was probably a zombie at that point. But I was just really tired, so sorry if it felt like I was brushing you off. I didn't mean to. I was just very tired. The other one was I was hoping to live tweet the entire time with pictures and stuff, but the cell phone reception inside of the building was pretty bad, so it wasn't letting me actually send pictures. Anyways, let's move on and talk about the fun stuff. Cryptozoic, they were actually having some technical issues of their own. All the cell phone noise short-circuited their router, and we were standing in line for a while waiting for them to get everything going back up. Eventually on Thursday, they got it all going again. They didn't really have too many issues after that. Let's talk about Thursday, right? Cory just happened to be walking by, and he could tell that we were all pretty anxious to play the game. And, we were kind of twiddling our thumbs, and I think he recognized that. He walked over and came and talked to us for quite a bit. I'm sure he was really busy. He had all kinds of stuff he probably had to do. He didn't need to take his time aside to talk to us, but that was a really stand-up thing to do. But some of the things I was asking him about, the first one was, it kind of felt like WoW lost a lot of its luster once they started doing the wide-scale public test realms and people figured out how to data mine everything off of the PTR. A lot of the sense of mystique and exploration and discovery that was great about WoW initially, really early on in the game, was just lost on me at least, because you could just go on a website and you know every little tiny detail about everything that was coming out, and that was like 6 months in advance before it came out. It takes out a lot of the fun, when you already know what you're going to get before you do. I like to discover stuff firsthand myself, and it's kind of hard when, even if you try to avoid the information, it's right there in front of you and somebody else mentions it. What they have going for them, though, is that they have some really great in-house testing tools with the software, and just that they've been making games for quite a long time themselves. The WoW TCG hardly ever needed a card band. I think Cory said it was something like 8 cards in its entire lifetime, which is pretty outstanding. And with the in-house testing tools they have, they're not going to really need a PTR very much. If they do, it'll only be like a week or 2 weeks before, I would imagine. So that's a really big deal to me, that the first time I see a card and you see a card and everybody sees a card is the exact same moment. It's like that pre-release, everybody's seeing the card for the first time at the same time, and we all have that like, oh wow moment and get really excited and everything. The next one was he's really putting a ton of work into making real money tournaments happen. It's not just a once a month or once every other month thing, that it could be weekly and it could even be daily. There's still a few hurdles and some red tape they have to clear, but he feels like he's in pretty strong ground to make it happen. And if it did, just think of how big it would be for the game. That's a really big draw for people to be able to compete regularly and have that competition actually mean something. Sure, the losers are going to be out some entry fee, but the winner could come out on top, be able to fund their hobby. The next time a set comes out, they'll already have the funding to build that deck ahead of time, and that's just off of playing the game and nothing outside, which I think is really great. If there was a big tournament or a convention, you might be able to pay for your plane ticket to that convention even, which would be really awesome. On the flip side, they really want gold sinks to actually mean something, that can't just be funny money. You have to actually get some fun activity out of it. I don't know if you ever played what was it, Super Mario World for Super Nintendo. When you got to the end of the level, you would get that wheel that would spin, and you'd get like a star, and if you got enough stars, it would unlock the bonus level. That's kind of, I think, what they're aiming for with the gold, is that it unlocks this bonus activity that's a lot of fun and really cool. In Super Mario, you didn't need all those extra lives, but it was fun just to get them with all the boxes spinning around and all that other cool stuff. Next up, one of the other things I was asking him about is the way guilds are going to work. Wouldn't it really suck if you spent a whole bunch of time, you and your friends, working on the perfect deck for the next big tournament, and then just some random scrub joins the guild and leaks all that information that you spent a ton of effort into? and now everybody knows what your perfect deck was. Well, that's kind of what they're aiming for is, oh, that's the cat in the background. That's what they're aiming for is that you're going to have your big guild for the social aspect and for PvE and, maybe for guild versus guild tournaments, but you're also going to be able to form these small scale teams that you can work on either draft testing to see what your team thinks the best draft strategy is, or deck testing so that you can really put a lot of focus into that deck for that next big tournament. So the guilds and the teams might not necessarily even be connected. You could have different members of your team be in different guilds, and it wouldn't really collide with anything or make anything messed up as far as strategy goes or anything like that. And I think that's really cool. That's a big deal to me, to be able to have the team that I'm with and then also be in a big guild with my friends, and they don't necessarily have to be the same people. The final one here is that PvE content is going to absolutely blow people's minds. Cory and the other guys couldn't give out a whole lot of details about PvE, at least not ones that I felt comfortable talking about, because a lot of it was, we're not supposed to tell you guys this yet, but we're going to tell you anyways. So, on good faith, I'm going to keep that stuff secret. But PvE content is going to blow people's minds. The idea that you're just going to bring in one deck and use it for the entire dungeon is totally off. There's going to be decks that you're building within the dungeon, all kinds of weird activities and puzzles. They might not even be using a deck for that dungeon. Who knows? There's all kinds of really interesting and strange things that they could do that nobody's ever seen before. I think that's really cool. Let's move on to me talking to Ben. I think the real thing to say is that the Cryptozoic team is operating on a whole nother level. People don't realize how much thought and effort these guys have put into the game. The interesting ideas that they've come up with are so far out of left field, nobody else could have ever thought of it. But that's kind of what they were even saying is, how come nobody else has ever thought of this? Some of this stuff is so simple that you would think it would be widespread already, but whatever reason it isn't. Anyways, talking to Ben, he was talking a lot about, balancing the game and making sure that it's interactive across all turns so that, that combo deck you're playing. I personally really love playing combo, but I can totally recognize that some people hate playing against it, that at some point it becomes really unfun to play against. And the idea that since they're building the game from the ground up, they can kind of avoid some of those unfun elements while still keeping combo decks as an archetype intact. And that's a big deal to me because I definitely like playing combo, but I don't want people to hate playing against me, especially if it's in tournaments and ends up my deck gets banned because everybody hates it kind of thing, Maybe, yeah, your combo deck finally goes off on turn 6 and just wins the game right then and there, but what was happening up until that point? And since they kind of have these guidelines that they're following of no turn 1 wins and stuff like that, that there's always going to be some point where you could have made a different choice and maybe interacted with the combo deck differently. On that same note, even the creature versus creature decks where you're just on that same note, even the troop versus troop decks where you're both kind of smashing in and being really aggressive, there's still an incredible amount of interaction, which surprised me. A lot of the cards have some kind of ability text on them, and the fact that you could play one after another and the order in which you play them can completely change everything actually means that there's a really big skill cap to the game and that there's a lot of potential for counterplay so that the game itself is going to be a lot deeper and more interesting. So that kind of sums up what I was talking to Ben with and some of the other guys as well. Last thing I'm going to talk about is, speaking of awesomeness, the Dragon Lord dinner was freaking epic, Oh man, just sitting across from these guys, having dinner with them, enjoying their company, and the fact that I was throwing some ideas out there and a few other guys were throwing some ideas out there, Ben or somebody else would whip out their phone real fast and, punch in what we were talking about and being like, oh, we never even thought of that. That just, it was awesome. That was an incredible feeling. Another one, is he was saying Voracious Hatchling is definitely still a card. So in case you guys don't remember which one that is, there hasn't been any art spoiled for it, so some people might not know about it yet. It's a 2/2 flyer for 1 sapphire. Yeah, that's right. You can play it on turn 1. You're getting a 2/2 flyer, which is definitely really strong. The drawback is that you have to have a certain number of different cards in your deck. I think they were saying somewhere between like 18 and 20 right now, which is definitely a build around card. But the fact that that card gets better the more and more sets they print is pretty cool. And that was another thing they were talking about, is keeping in mind the future sets while they're building the current ones, that there's tons of room for development across sets like that. Finally, you've probably been staring at it here and read all the cool stuff on him, is Zidu. He was spoiled at the Dragon Lord dinner. They gave us this little cool card that has a flash drive on it, and we were the first ones to see this guy, and we all have this card that has the art and the background. You can see the background in my video here, all on that card, and that's really cool to own. I'm super excited that I was able to get one, because that's a big deal to me. Anyways, Zidu's definitely interesting. He's going to be in set 2, so this is the first set 2 spoiler that anybody has seen, and he's going to be really great as a win condition for those blue decks. You know, if he's able to connect even once, there's tons of options you have. You could use that Eternal Spirit, I think it was, where it's a 2/2 flyer that draws you a card. You could copy all those that are out and end up drawing a ton of cards. You could, if you had a bunch of counter magics in your hand, you could copy all those so that there's no chance that your opponent's going to get back into the game because you're able to counter everything. I think there's all kinds of cool prospects for this guy, and it's a fun card. It's really cool, and it's nice to see something from set 2 when we don't even have set 1 in our hands. They've been putting a lot of work into set 2 already. They've been saying they've been drafting a lot recently, and some other fun stuff that I probably shouldn't talk about. Anyways, so that just about wraps up the video. Final things I want to say is you know, I got a bunch of this promo mercenary. I'm going to try to give some of them out to the other content producers who weren't able to get one for themselves. I kind of want to help out the rest of the community, the guys who've been keeping the excitement going for Hex in general, and you know, they deserve something. So I'm going to try to hook those guys up with one or two, find out who wasn't able to get one. And then I also have a couple extra ones myself that I'll be able to give away on the channel. So definitely subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. If this is your first time watching my videos, I definitely appreciate if you do subscribe, because that helps me keep going. The other thing I wanted to say was 2 big thank yous. First off, to Boss Hoss on the forums. You know, I actually left my luggage sitting around at the con. Right after I left, I was on my way to the airport and realized, holy crap, I left my suitcase just sitting there on the floor. And it turns out he was able to find it. It was sitting right where I left it. We were talking right before I left. He found it and mailed it back to me, and so I owe him a huge thank you. Thank you, man, for doing that, because you really saved my butt. But the biggest one I really got to say is to Colin. You know, I wouldn't have been able to even make it to the con or the Dragon Lord dinner had it not been for him. Him giving me the opportunity to be there is really huge, and I hope that by me contributing to the Hex Vault site, I'm able to at least repay that in some small way, and just, you know, hopefully I'll be able to keep putting out content that other people enjoy, and it'll be kind of a pay it forward situation where, but I owe Colin a huge thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to be at Gen Con. I really had a great time. The other one I finally wanted to say was check out the hexvault.com site. Like I was saying, I'm going to be putting content out for them. I already put an article out a couple weeks back for them, so that's there, but I'm going to keep doing that. You're going to see exclusive stuff on the Hex Vault site from me pretty frequently. Check out the interview that Colin did with Ben, because there's a whole lot of stuff, a bunch of insight that I wasn't able to talk about here that Ben gave about the game, and it's a really great interview. Finally, check out the hexinformer.com site. I was talking to this guy at the con for quite a long time in the line. Standing in line was actually almost as much fun as playing the game, because talking to everybody was great. But he's going to be working on a podcast. I think he's already got one episode up. So check that out, and I know he's got more content on the line coming for everybody else. So stay tuned. Less fail, more function.